All right, everyone, the time is 10:15. So we are going to be starting our next session, which is Community Through Love, a story of the disenfranchised. This will be hosted by GALEO, Georgia Muslim Voter Project, and the Democracy Fellows at Georgia Gwinnett College. So without further ado, I'm going to be passing it over to them so that they can start their presentation.
Hi, thank you all for coming today and for joining us. And welcome to Community Through Love. When tackling the subject of community, we were inspired by Gwinnett County's Welcoming Week, which actually ended on the 19th, just a few days ago. Welcoming Week is a nationwide initiative that pays homage to the people that are the very fiber of our communities, immigrants, refugees, and longtime residents. We wanted to expand on this idea and tackle the topics of like voter participation and overall civic engagement. And many of you know friends, family, colleagues that are vital members of our community, but are ineligible to vote. They have no say in laws that may impact them. And regardless of the reason behind their ineligibility, their voices deserve to be heard. So thank you for joining us in celebrating their stories. And I hope you come away today with an understanding that we don't only vote for ourselves, but we vote for the good of our community. So from here, I'm going to pass it on to Raphael, who's going to be explaining an interactive portion of our presentation today.
Thank you, Alexis. Welcome everybody again. Thank you guys so much for showing up to this. I think it's important for us to come together in community and learn from one another so we can better help each other. The Jamboard portion of our presentation is kind of, as Alexis said, an interactive piece. What we're hoping to do at this moment is on slide 2 of the Jamboard. If you saw me, if you can see my screen, I just clicked over to slide 2. I'm not sure how familiar everybody else is with Jamboard, so I'll explain things as much in detail as I can. In this slide,
hey, Raphael, I'm so sorry, I can't see your screen. Can anyone else see it? Oh, you can? Okay, so it's obviously me. You're fine. Continue.
Sounds good. If anybody else can't see my screen, please drop a message in the chat so we can get that resolved. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that, Alexis. In this second slide of the Jamboard, what we're hoping for you to input before the panelists give their testimonies and speak their stories is reasons that drive you to be civically engaged, whether that means you going out to vote or coming to summits like these, contacting your elected officials, whatever else it is that you do to make a difference and impact in your communities. So for example, I'm coming over here to the sticky note section. If you can see my cursor going over the sticky notes right under the mouse cursor. And then I'll just pick a color that I like. I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention that the link to this Jamboard is in the chat right now. You should see that I dropped it in a few minutes ago. But I'm gonna type in this sticky note, something central to my personal identity that drives me to be politically and civically engaged is my identity as an undocumented person. And so I'll just save that and hit cancel, and then it's here. So feel free to just generate whatever it is that affects you personally, aspects of your lived experience, as it says here, that drive you to the polls or drive you to be engaged civically. What we're hoping for is to see this populated with a number of sticky notes. Don't worry about covering text or anything like that. I think we've gone over the instructions well enough now. We want to see this populated throughout our time together. So can somebody else on the team drop a sticky note on there? I just want to confirm that it is accessible to everyone.
Yep, give us just 1 second.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yes, that's perfect. And if you guys want to keep adding along as we're discussing, This page is going to be specifically for things that, like we said, are impacting us as individuals. There you go. And after our guest speakers give their stories, then we can talk about things that impact our communities. Maybe you saw something here that might not affect you personally, but that you do still care about, and that is something that drives you to be politically engaged, or you heard something that the panelists said, and that'll be in a future slide. But for now, these are just things that directly impact you and drive you to be civically engaged. So while this happens, I guess I'll give it back to Alexis, and you can steer us along.
Yep, perfect. Thank you for that explanation. So again, thank you guys so much for coming today. We have 3 different panelists with us today. So we are going to start with a professor of history at Georgia Gwinnett College, Dr. Andres Ijar. So Dr. Andres, I'm going to let you kind of take it over. I do have a leading question though, and I kind of just want to know overall what spurred your passion about voting as someone who can't vote, and how, yeah. So I'll let you take it over. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. So, well, I can vote in the United States, but I can vote in Mexico, and Mexicans can vote in the United States for Mexican elections through the consulate. So I've been engaging with that since that possibility was a reality, which was around 10 years ago. So I voted for the presidential election in Mexico, which saw a complete change of power structures and governmental policies. So I was part of that, which I thought, and I've been following that movement of the current president because he's been around since 40 years ago. So that's a movement. It's not a one-man thing. It's not a messiah movement. It is a collective thing that I was very proud to be part of. Now, specifically with the United States, well, it's very frustrating because I've been here since high school. I pay taxes since high school. I have property. I contribute to the United States probably more than most Americans. I teach at GGC. I taught high school. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I really don't see why this, well, I do see it, but we can talk about that later. But yeah, it's just frustrating, and there is not much I can do about it.
On that note, what are like 3 issues that you're very passionate about, and 3 issues that may like kind of impact your life in the United States? And if you did have a voice, or if you were able to vote, it would be something that would be at the top of your priority list.
Right. There's so many on that list that and it's not just for the United States, it will be for the entire globe, for the world. This is a global thing for me. And if you only do it in the United States, it will not work. Example, global minimum wage. That will be one example. So there is nothing we can do here because then they can outsource it to other places, right? So to me, it's global. That's the first thing. You cannot think just the United States here. Because even if we make the moves, others will not, and we will be left behind. So it is for our own, in many ways, we don't do the things that we need to do simply because if we do them, other countries will take advantage of that. For example, well, you can just outsource it to Mexico and China and pay $1 an hour. That's a specific example. So anyway, but specifically immigration, I would like to have votes so I can vote for politicians that will not vilify and evilize immigrants, that will not use illegal immigrants to excuse the inequality that capitalism has created. I will elect politicians that speak about regions, speak about federations, speak about a North American regional confederation, which I think is the future between Mexico, United States, and Canada. I will look for politicians that go beyond the evident, that think about the future in a way that it is going. And if Mexico, the United States, and Canada doesn't get together as one regional federation, we will be in trouble, especially the United States. That's one, immigration. The other is, you said 3, right?
Yeah, if you're able to, that'd be fantastic.
The other one is body control, specifically in Georgia, right? And in the states that have a limited abortion to 6 weeks. If I'm as a man, you know, I see it from the outside, but then I put myself into the shoes of a woman. I say, well, if something is growing inside me and the government is telling me that I cannot get rid of it, I will have a problem with that as a man. So that would like politicians that will allow me to control my own body. And it is not just abortion. It is also assisted suicide. I would like to die in a you know, dignified. I will not have to be subtubing around and some priest coming here and telling me that I should, you know, live for God. We are not a theocracy. That was the third one. I don't want religious values put on me. I don't believe in God. Maybe somebody else believes in a different God. We're not all Christians. And this has become a commonwealth. It's like the Puritans back, because I'm a history professor, so I know what I'm talking about. And the third one will be, well, it is all connected, right? I connected the ability to control our own destiny in our own bodies. And I was gonna add illegal drugs. And not just because I wanna recreate myself with drugs because it's my own body. It's because of what drugs had done to the community and all the incarcerated young men and women that are out there for the prison industrial complex to make money, because our jails are not even public anymore. We privatize them. So I will go for politicians that look for jails that look for rehabilitation, that look to incorporate people back to society, as opposed to warehousing them and paying them, outsourcing a corporation so they can put more in. And I can go on and on, but I'll stop there.
No, you're good. Thank you so much. I think everyone in the chat is very excited about your passion. As Sabrina said, no, keep going. So please, while we're doing this, if anyone does have any questions, you can pop them in the chat and we'll make sure that they get addressed. But on that note, I also wanted to kind of talk about the censorship laws and maybe the bills that have been coming out lately and how that impacts your work as a college professor.
Thank you, because that was the other one that I forgot. And I have it in my notes, but look at these notes, people. I can barely understand them myself. So, yeah, not only am I a foreigner, right? So can I speak freely? Because it's not even a citizen. Even with a citizen, there are things that you can say, cannot say. Are you protected? Are you protected? Then we go into the layers of who's protected in America. And I'm sort of in the middle, right? There is people here who are undocumented. That to me is just the fact that you're here speaking is even dangerous. So hats off. So what I'm saying in my case is just who draws the line? Who decides? So I'm a history professor. I will talk about sex. I will talk about race. I will talk about dying dignity. I will talk about war. I will talk about exploitation, civil rights. I will talk about everything. That's history. So who is going to tell me who I should not talk about? Or what I should not talk about? It's going to be the government, some politician elected by certain faction. Because that takes me to the other one in our system, which is not a pure democracy, right? So we don't really live in a pure democracy. Therefore, because we don't live in a pure democracy, how can I speak freely if a certain pocket of people has the power to stop it? Hence, electoral college, that will be an example. The Senate in the United States, in which Idaho has the same power than California, the executive power and all the things they can do. All these things that prevents us from having a true democracy, not just in the United States, in most of the world.
I love that. Thank you so much. And really my last kind of question for you to round this out, it may seem like a silly question now, but kind of like how satisfied are you with the representation of your community, kind of 1 through 10, if you had to pick a number?
Yeah, I was gonna, look, I put a 5 here. To state, like Pontius Pilate, I wash my hands, I give him a 5. But no, ultimately, this is what I was going to say with once we have capitalism and profit, the politicians' hands are tied. The whole system is rotten. It needs to start new. That's where I stand.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ihar. That was fantastic. I really appreciate your passion.
Thank you.
And I think that this is an exemplary example of, if someone had their voice heard, if they had the ability to vote, how different our policies would be if all voices truly were heard. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me. Good job,
Of course. And again, if anyone has any questions for Dr. Ihar, we can always kind of come back to them later in this session as well. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. Okay, moving forward, we are going to be speaking with a junior at Oglethorpe University who's studying political science, Aide. Aide, are you there?
Hello, everyone. Yes. Can y'all hear me?
We can. Aide, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to lead you in with kind of that same question. What has spurred your passion about voting as somebody who is ineligible to vote? And kind of like, what does your community mean to you overall?
Okay. Well, first of all, I wanted to start with my name is Aide. I am a junior at Oglethorpe University. Basically, what has inspired me to get involved is the fact that I am undocumented, so I can't vote. And I have been living here since the age of 5. I'm now 27. So I've literally been living here my whole life. And I always get asked this question, well, why are you studying political science if you can't really do much with it, especially because I can't vote or I can't really get involved. Well, my reason behind it is I'm very passionate because I want to use my voice to advocate for my community and raise awareness of yeah, maybe I can't vote, but I can raise awareness about these issues that involve me and many other people that are in the same situation. So yeah, that's basically why I'm so passionate about it. And a lot of people think I do have DACA, so I'm very thankful for that. I've had DACA since 2012.
Did something happen? Can anyone hear her?
We might have lost Aide. Let me see if she's still on the call.
Wait, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good now, Aide. Go ahead.
Where did you guys lose me? I'm sorry.
You were saying you were thankful for DACA.
Oh yeah, I'm very thankful for DACA because it does we can drive, I can work, but it's just the bare minimum. DACA was never meant to be the solution to a very broken immigration system. And they've kept it that way because it leaves people very vulnerable and in a sense in a limbo. So I feel like we should put people in power that actually care to fix this system, because we are paying into taxes, we are part of the community, we are we are trying to get involved, but it's just they don't care to fix it. So that's what I really feel about it. And I am also thankful for institutions like Oglethorpe that have opened up their doors to people like myself, because Georgia, like I said, I've had DACA since 2012. Oglethorpe was the only institution in Georgia that opened up their doors to people like myself, because in Georgia, people that have DACA or that are fully undocumented, we can't go into public institutions, we can't pay in-state tuition. So a lot of times people are kind of just left on the side and in the shadows.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that information. We've also posted a link to the DACA website online or on the chat if anyone wants to learn any more. But if you could just tell me maybe if there's maybe 1 or 2 other issues that you're really, really passionate about, that if you were able and had the ability to vote, kind of, what would you be voting on and what's really important to you?
I would, if I could vote, I would definitely vote in reference to women's rights. I feel like politicians should not be making any laws, especially if they're not women themselves, in healthcare. Because the reason why I'm not doing video is because I just had surgery a week ago. So I feel like healthcare should be more accessible for everyone, and it shouldn't be something that's privatized and that the government is like, it shouldn't be expensive to go get checked. It shouldn't be expensive to do things that everybody should have the right to do.
I completely agree. And again, I'm going to ask you that same kind of question, although I kind of see where the answer might be going. So out of a 1 through 10, how do you feel like representatives represent you and your community?
I'm sorry, I think I lost you again. What did you say the last part?
I was just asking 1 through 10, kind of how you feel current representation is for your community.
Um, I feel like there's a lot of potential, but it's we still have to work on it. I do see that it's getting. I live in Gwinnett, so I have seen how much it's changed over the years and how it's getting more diverse, and that's because people from the grassroots are putting in that work to, have more representation out there. So it's like I know there is potential. I just feel like we need to work on it.
100%. And I'm sorry, you may have mentioned this, but are there any specific ways that you personally get involved or anything you can recommend to others to kind of start their journey?
Well, me personally, right now, like I said, I am at Oglethorpe. I am part of an undocumented organization that represents our undocumented students on campus. So that is a way that I am getting involved. I'm also I'm trying to help out with GALEO, getting people registered to vote and stuff. And overall, I'm just taking any opportunity to get involved and educate others about like everything that is going on.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your testimony and about how voting in your community impacts you personally. We really, really appreciate it. And again, if anyone has any questions for Dr. Ihar or Aide, they can pop them in the chat at any time. And just a reminder that we do still have that Jamboard going. So if anyone wants to pop into the link that's in the chat, go to slide 2 and pop in, reasons why you vote personally. And again, thank you, Aide. So lastly, but definitely not least, we have Mason Goodwin, who is with us. He is with the Georgia Youth Justice Coalition. Mason, are you there?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going awesome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Not too bad. So thank you for being here, first off. I really appreciate it. And same question, kind of what spurred your passion about voting and kind of like what does community overall mean to you as well as vote?
So I come from an Atlanta public school. So there's that whole situation. A lot of us are like Title I students, like we're growing up low income, etc. I have a bit more privilege because obviously white male, etc. But like growing up in that, seeing like hypercriminalization of like some of my Black and brown friends, etc. Coming from a low income single parent household myself, like all of like the like basically systemic factors that play into like creating really hard situations for all of us kind of spurred my energy. I think a big turning point for me was during 2020, during everything that went down in Atlanta, etc. And that kind of was like a waking point, I think, for a lot of people. And that kind of got me involved. And that was like when I turned 18, so I could like register to vote, etc.
Amazing, thank you. What positive or negative impact do you think that voting has on disenfranchised communities?
So I think like something that's important to understand is voting is kind of like the bare minimum to hit. But like it's very hard for certain communities to hit that bare minimum. Like I grew up in South DeKalb, there's limited polling places, etc. And that disproportionately impacts like Black and brown communities on purposely, like etc. Like we have to have a whole voting rights bill just to get like Black and brown voters access to the ballot boxes. And we've seen huge rollbacks like in that. A lot of Georgia Youth Justice work is like classroom to the Capitol. So this past legislative session, I know there was conversation about this in the previous panel, but SB 202 passed. And like part of SB 202 was basically Saturday, Sunday polling was limited, and it only happens, I think, 1 week during early voting. And that's obviously an attack on Black and brown voters who are going out Sunday to the polls, etc. So it's like there's that bare minimum that's like very hard to hit, but it's also like there's other avenues to get involved. And I think that's like very important and kind of like where we need to start moving. I mean, like my kind of like organized experience with Georgia Youth Justice, and we're actually like making change. And I think realizing that there's more power outside of the ballot box is like really important. I mean, part of like something recently we did was fighting for early voting sites, pressuring our Fulton County to make sure that we had access on college campuses for those voting sites. And like we actually got that done. Now the HBCUs will have an early voting site, Fulton County will have an early voting site, and Georgia State will have a voting site. And like understanding that like everyday college students like have that like capacity to do that is like really impactful.
That's amazing. Actually, we attempted to get a voting site as well, but sadly we were unable to. So my next question is kind of, we've talked a little bit about things that you're passionate about. What are, if you could pick maybe 2 or 3 political topics, things that you would want people to go out and vote on?
Big one in the state of Georgia is education. How partisan am I allowed to be here? Can I speak truthfully on everything occurring?
This is your testimony.
All right, cool. I mean, Stacey Abrams and Kemp both have very different political spheres and ideas around like what education should look like in Georgia. I mean, in the past 20 years, we haven't had a fully funded public education system, and we just got one this last session, but that was through federal dollars through the American Rescue Plan. So without kind of that money coming down, Georgia wouldn't have a fully funded public education system. I mean, we've seen Kemp like with the 1084 bill, which was like our censorship bill, which extremely limited like what can be talked in classrooms. And the bill was super vague. So it wasn't like, oh, you can't like talk about like the 1619 project, but it was more like, you can't talk about these general concepts. And now teachers are afraid of like, what can we talk about in our classroom truthfully about like what's occurred in our past in the country. So that's a big one. I mean, just like the general idea around like having a need-based like scholarship. Like we're one of 2 states that doesn't right now. That's a huge impact. I come from Atlanta public schools, so there's more money there. I got to achieve Atlanta scholarship. So like I have the ability to pay for college, but if you're not in Atlanta and you don't have access to that scholarship, then there's no need-based scholarships really you have access to in the state of Georgia. I mean, that directly like changes like how kids get access to higher education. I think the other one is just like all of our students actually being able to like be themselves like within like a classroom. Like that's huge. Part of the 1080 bill was excluding trans kids from being able to compete in sports. Like that's just excluding an entire population of kids that are like already vulnerable, and then you're putting like blatant attacks on them. So yeah, I think education, kind of those ideas is the huge one to go out for. Reproductive rights, I feel like is the go-to right now, just because that's such a big issue. I mean, 6-week abortion law is like super, super strict already. Kemp has talked about making that more strict, or even banning like contraceptives, which is just like insane. And then I think the last one for me is criminal justice, like coming from that Atlanta school background, public school background. I think education and criminal justice system like sadly intertwine. So I think any sort of criminal justice reform that we can get, I mean, having cops out of our schools, because cops aren't actually like public safety. Instead, they're used like criminalize Black and brown students. We have the whole school to prison pipeline that exists. A really good documentary is I think it's called 13th, and that talks about the entire criminal justice system and all like the racist history, slave patrols, etc., going into like Black codes, etc., and then now mass incarceration, and it gives a really good rundown on all that.
That's really good information. Thank you so much. And then on that note, do you have any ideas for anybody who is maybe ineligible to vote, but they want to start getting engaged within their community, or any way that they can volunteer?
I think the first thing is like, I know New Georgia Project, all these larger organizations have really good capacity to go get people registered to vote. So like, even if you yourself can't vote, making sure everyone you know that's registered or isn't registered, like goes out, makes their voices heard, etc. I think that's kind of like a really great starting point to get into politics. I think the other thing is like, if you work, a lot of us work in like restaurant spaces, etc., unionize, like at this point, like form union, give power to you as a worker. A lot of us are students, a lot of us are working out of Starbucks, a lot of us are working, etc., out of those spaces. Like you can build like capacity in that way. I think organizing like within your college campuses and your local community, like holding your city councils accountable, like is like a really effective way to get involved. And then like, I mean, what Georgia Youth Justice is doing is pretty incredible. I mean, we're pretty like amazing not to be like that, but I think like understanding like all of these like the Capitol, etc., like these are school boards, like these are places we can go to, these are places we can make our voices heard. Like even if you don't have a direct goal in mind, just showing up there and letting them know we're here, you're going to have to listen to us and you're going to be held accountable to a higher standard, like is super, super important. A lot of people don't realize like the Capitol, you can just walk in there any day of session. And like if there's something going on, you're hearing about this like voter suppression law 202, you're hearing about 1084, like show up, give testimony, let them know like, hey, this isn't okay. And so like a huge part of that is like storytelling. And then also like eventually, like if you're going to the Capitol, like this is our advantage. And like we're students, we're young, and we're telling them, hey, why aren't you fully funding our public education? Like eventually they're going to have to listen. They're going to look really bad, especially when like media gets involved, etc. And also like telling your story, giving testimony is like a way to actually like change people's mind.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Mason. I really appreciate that. That was really informative too. And just a fun little note. I know Dr. Ihar is very passionate about unionization and is also writing a book on that currently, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe you guys can get connected afterwards and speak a little bit on that.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was amazing. So I currently am going to hand it back to Raphael, and we're going to check up on the Jamboard. Thank you again to all of our panelists. And lastly, you know, if anyone does have any questions, please continue. You can pop them in the chat. We can kind of follow up in a few minutes with that. But Raphael, if you're able to take it over.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, everybody. It's been amazing. And thank you, Alexis. So now we're going to move over to the third slide in the Jamboard. And we're going to add new sticky notes, but these are going to be based on either things that you've heard in the panelist testimonies or things that you saw in the previous slide of the Jamboard that might not directly impact you, but that you recognize as important needs or injustices in the world that might drive you to, again, become politically involved or civically engaged. For example, during the sessions, I heard a lot of talk about education, and I was fortunate enough, thanks to the Dream.us scholarship for undocumented students, to get a full ride through college. But I do recognize that a lot of my friends had to take on a lot of debt, and that weighs on them for their entire lives. And I definitely do think that the government needs to do more for the people who are more affected in that regard. I know that everybody is saying, you know, what's been done so far is good, but a little bit only helps those who are best off. And the people who had to take more loans because of their economic situations did not really see much relief in that dent that was made in their loans. And so I think education and student loan forgiveness is what I'm going to put down. And then I'll move my sticky note somewhere else, and you guys feel free to populate those wherever on the slide. What we want to see is how the sticky notes have evolved from the first slide that we looked at to now that we can speak not just for ourselves, but also for other members of our communities or people that we know and love, that we associate with, including the stories that the panelists have. Yeah, thank you so much for that one. That's a beautiful one. And I think that's the best part of having these kinds of conversations, is that a lot of times we don't realize that issues are so important, right? Me as a cisgendered man, I might not be able to fully grasp just how important and how vital it is that we mobilize around reproductive rights is, until I listen to a woman and really hear her out and understand what her struggles are about. And so that's why it's important for us to come together like this and be able to hear one another. So we'll give it a few more minutes for things to populate on this. If you just want to give a shout out to one of the panelists and thank them, that's totally valid too. We just want to see sticky notes exploding here. Yes, expanding DACA. Thank you.
And again,
Alexa,
to anyone who needs to get to the Jamboard, it is in the chat, and we are on page 3 of the Jamboard. Yes, give us 1 second. We'll pop the link back. Twins, Raphael. And then give us just 1 more minute. We do have an educational component at the end of this that we would like to share with everyone. If we can just get a few more sticky notes on the Jamboard.
and Alexis. Oh, sorry, I completely. So now that we're seeing all of these issues, I think you guys, everybody, please feel free to keep adding sticky notes in whatever color is your favorite. I think the more we can see what we get out of coming together like this, the better. And it can serve as a reminder of our time together. But now looking at all these issues, as Mason put it, voting is oftentimes just the bare minimum of what we can and should be doing to kind of enact a change in these issues, in these directions, to correct these injustices or to provide for these needs. And so I think SALIC prepared an educational component that can teach us more about what exactly we can do beyond voting to ensure that we're always making progress in terms of making these issues better every day. So SALIC, if you want to lead us in that, I'll go ahead and stop the screen share, but you guys don't stop putting up those sticky notes, okay?
All right, yeah, good morning, everyone. So far, it's been amazing being here with y'all. Just before I share my screen, I just wanted to, again, shout out all the panelists. Y'all are absolutely phenomenal, and I honestly wish that this session that just the panel itself could have been like another 2 hours, honestly, because it was really refreshing and really inspirational and empowering, listening and hearing y'all's stories and what inspires and captivates y'all, and really pushes y'all through the work and through what y'all do, through your activism. So I just want to thank you all for that. Rafaela, if you could give me co-host privileges so I could share my screen.
I am trying. but I'm not sure if I can do that.
Who's hosting right now? Whoever's hosting can pass on co-host capabilities to Selig.
This Campus Vote is the host and that Raphael is a co-host.
Yeah, so I'm a co-host, but I'm not sure if I can like give you co-hosting privileges. I think that has to be Campus Vote. If you want, Salik, I can share my screen.
Yeah, I saw you had the PowerPoint up, so
Yeah,
that should work.
let's
just
do that
fine.
and that'll be perfect. Okay,
Awesome. Appreciate
1
it.
second.
No worries.
Giving some accidental sneak previews of the future slides.
That's completely fine. Honestly, we've covered a lot of it already, especially Mason. So I honestly, really appreciate it. But anyways, great to be here again with all of you. My name is Salik Sohani. I am a senior community organizer with Georgia Muslim Voter Project. Y'all might have heard of us, but if not, we are a nonpartisan 501c3 organization. We were founded in 2015, 2016 in response to the unfortunate anti-Muslim rhetoric that came about in the wake and the aftermath of 9/11. On top of that, we recognize that there are over 100,000 Muslims in the state of Georgia. And unfortunately, as well, a large number of those Muslims, and honestly, just a large number of the folks in our immigrant communities are either not registered to vote or sometimes feel a little bit apathetic towards voting. But we recognize that was sort of, that narrative was also sort of misconstrued, that our communities, like it's been spoken about before, we have all these barriers that keep us from the polls, that keep us from understanding what we can do to be advocates on behalf of ourselves and our families and our communities. And so what we do at Georgia Muslim Voter Project, GMVP, is we try to engage voters, register them, educate them, and many other things. But most of all, it's all about empowerment. And that's pretty much part of the reason why I'm here today as well. I want to help you all hopefully understand, now that we've heard all these amazing stories and narratives about what inspires certain folks to action, I would love to turn that inspiration into action, hopefully. And so let's understand together what we can do and what our role is in our government and in our system. But before we really get into things, I'd just love to hear in the chat, what are some of the methods of advocacy, and that these can be things that maybe some of the panelists brought up, or maybe something that you're seeing in the Jamboard, for example, maybe even some things that you've seen in the past couple of years, right? There's so many issues that we've been rallying around, but what are some of those methods of advocacy that y'all have seen that have been especially effective and have held our elected officials accountable? Protesting. Thanks, Alexis. Yeah. What else? And of course, also feel free to come off mute if you'd like to. Lobbying, definitely. I remember Mason spoke about that. We see Ida said organizing, 100%, hosting town halls, yes. Connecting with other communities and local officials, definitely, yeah. These are all absolutely amazing responses, and 100%. Again, y'all, like, there's literally no need for me to do this presentation. Y'all literally taking the words out of my mouth. But again, like, these are absolutely great responses, and honestly, really amazing ways that we can hold our elected officials accountable. So yeah, definitely, let's get into it. Rafael, next slide, please. Awesome. So we already spoke again about, and Mason spoke about how voting is the bare minimum. It's the first step in having our voices heard, right? But it's not the end all be all for us, right? There are still different methods of advocacy, regardless of your status, that you can participate in, both on the state and the county and on the local level. But first of all, we have to figure out who our elected officials are in the first place, right? So first, we have to find them, and we're going to go into in a little bit how exactly we can do that on all the different levels. And then we can also contact our elected officials, and we can do that through phone, we can do that through email, we can do that through postcards or letter by sending postcards or letters to our legislators. A really fun thing that I did during the pandemic with a couple of my friends, especially when there's a lot of attention around for redistricting, was I got some friends together and we literally like had a postcard party, had a postcard party and wrote postcards to our legislators. So definitely encourage y'all to do that if that's something that y'all feel like you would enjoy. Social media is another really great way that we can be advocates as well, and also hold our elected officials accountable. And the reason I really am emphasizing social media is because especially when elected officials are running for re-election, the incumbents especially, if and things go viral like crazy, they spread like a wildfire on social media. And so if an elected official's name is associated with a particular issue or something they said negatively, they don't like to see that, right? Because it hampers their ability to get reelected, to get supporters, to get donations, and so on and so forth, right? And so using social media, of course, we can use it. We can basically use social media as a tool and as an avenue to spread awareness about all these issues that we're passionate about, that we're speaking about in the Jamboard, that the panelists have spoken about. We can also use social media to show attention to some of the more negative things, or maybe also the positive things that our elected officials are doing, right? But it's a really, really great tool that we can use, and it's super easy. Y'all's generation is probably a lot more familiar with it than I am, but y'all definitely know how to use it a lot more than I do. So definitely harness social media whenever you can. And then I think, like Alexis mentioned, and some of you all mentioned, protesting, right? We definitely encourage y'all to protest, to participate in peaceful civil disobedience, right? But another way that you can also rally around an issue or a cause, and again, one of our panelists mentioned this before, is you can go to the Capitol, you can go to the city council, you can go to your county commission, and you can provide your own public input. You can tell them your story. You can talk about your community. You can tell them about the data that has to do with the different issues that you're passionate about as well. Next slide, Rafael. Awesome. So first and foremost, how do we find and contact our elected officials? And I hope y'all enjoyed the different gifts and things that we have over here. Hopefully they're not too distracting, but also hilarious. So first and foremost, we can utilize different nonpartisan websites. One is openstates.gov, and you can basically use that to identify the different districts you live in, and also your state representatives and state senators. You can also utilize the Georgia General Assembly website, which is legis.ga.gov. This is also a great way to further research your representatives, understand the legislation that they've supported, the issues that they've either sponsored or opposed, the different kinds of committees that they serve on as well. And also with the committees, those committees are pretty much, they're sort of divided up by subject area, right? So there's some on education and youth, there's some devoted to healthcare, so on and so forth. And so you can also, through the Georgia General Assembly website, determine opportunities for you to come to the Capitol to provide public input as well in these specific committees too. And of course, on the Georgia General Assembly website, you can also use it to find your elected officials' phone numbers, their email addresses. Just a heads up though, if you are contacting them, just note that usually your state representative or state senator's office assistant or administrative assistant will likely answer. The elected official themselves might answer if they're super accessible, but it really does vary. Next slide. Awesome. So this is just a quick, just a couple of quick screenshots about what exactly Open States looks like. You would, again, put your address into Open States. It'll assist you in locating your district number, as you can see over here on the right-hand side. You could see that, on the state level, you have the lower and the upper. The lower means this, your lower. So in this case, for this person, their representative would be Representative Greg Kennard. Their Georgia senator would be Senator Michelle Au. And then on the federal, you can also see on the federal level, the congressional level as well. So their senators would be Ossoff and Warnock, and then their one of their congresswomen would be Carolyn Bourdeaux. Next slide. Thank you. And then this is also, these are just screenshots for on legis.ga.gov. As you can see over here, you have the different committees that Representative Kennard serves on. You can see the representative's office address as well. So of course, you're also able to call them, you're also able to email them, but you are also able to visit them in their office as well, like one of the panelists mentioned. And you can see over here on the left-hand side, more of their information as well that sort of corresponds to the legis.ga.gov website. And then on the county level, and we're just using Gwinnett County as an example, usually it'll just be, if it's DeKalb County, for example, it'd be DeKalbCounty.com, something along those lines. You can also just type in your county onto Google, and it should populate within the first few, as one of the first few search results. But just for demonstration, we would go, if I wanted to find out who's on my board of commissioners for Gwinnett County, I would go to the government option, and from there, you'd be redirected to a menu of officials and all the different offices. And then you'd click on Board of Commissioners, and then from there, you can determine who your Board of Commissioners are. And then it's very, very similar on the city level as well. To find your elected officials, you would just go to your cities.gov page. So for Atlanta, it's atlanta.ga.gov. I'm sure it's very similar for many other cities across Georgia and across the US. And then very similarly, you would click on government, then you'd go to city council. And then that way you'd be able to find exactly who your city council members are. And also just a great way in general for you can go on ahead to the next slide. And just in general, another great way just to find out more about your elected officials and your candidates in general. I know GALEO has one, Georgia Muslim Voter Project has one, it's called Branch. And we've put our links in the final page of the Jamboard as well. These are really, really great. This is a really great tool, not only to find out, who your candidates are, and find out who your candidates are, find out who your elected officials are, but it also gives you the opportunity to do a little bit more of a deep dive on your candidate stances on various issues and different things that they might support or oppose and so on and so forth. And it's a really great way as well for you to sort of synthesize in one place all of your ballot choices as well. So highly encourage y'all to recommend to check out either galeo.branch.vote or gmvp.branch.vote. And over here, just coming back to it, this is just another screenshot of all the different Atlanta City Council members. So if you click on one of them, you'd see that this populates over here. And on the city council level as well, they also serve on different committees. As you can see over here, she serves on transportation, public safety and legal, and so on and so forth. Awesome. Now that we've found our elected officials, the next step is contacting them, right? What exactly does contacting them look like when I'm calling them or when I'm emailing them or whatnot? So there's, of course, different methods that you can do that. You can, of course, go in person, like I mentioned earlier, and speak to them either in the committee, or you can, approach them in their office if they are available. You can speak to them through phone, through email. You can also, of course, send them mail. And if you are referencing a certain bill, make sure to reference that bill number when you are reaching out to them, because everything that they receive is public record. It has to be public record. And so it's very important, and they can then reference the communication that they've gotten from you in committees and during testimonies as well. So it's very important that you reference the bill number. And again, you can go to the legis.ga.gov website to find all the different bills and learn more information about which bills have been supported or opposed. And again, writing letters and having postcard campaigns are especially effective when reaching out to your elected officials. But the last thing I want to emphasize just for now is that, look, you all know your community the best. Therefore, y'all should feel empowered to be your community's advocates, to be your family's advocates. And it's crucial that because our elected officials were elected to serve us, it's crucial that they understand our needs and our concerns. And so it's crucial at the end of the day that we hold our elected officials accountable. Again, like Mason mentioned, Georgia Youth Justice Coalition, they did that. They advocated, and they were able to get early voting sites on a few universities in Fulton County and DeKalb County. So just another great example of how advocacy can be really powerful. And so like I sort of mentioned, like just a couple minutes ago, public input can be really powerful for that reason. And again, Youth Justice Coalition is a fine example of how powerful public input can be. And it's powerful because it's open to anyone. It can be open. I grew up in Dalton. It could have been open to me all the way in Dalton. It can be open to someone all the way in Savannah, right? And what's been great, sort of a silver lining, I guess you could say, of the pandemic has been that there are now virtual testimony opportunities, virtual public input opportunities on the city, county, and on the state level as well. So it's open to everyone, right? Also, there is no status requirement, like I mentioned earlier. So it's accessible to everyone. As long as you have some form of ID, you can walk into the Capitol, you can speak to your legislators, you can provide testimony, right? It's also an amazing way to be face-to-face with your decision makers. I can't tell you how many times I've given testimony in a committee room and I've said something, I guess, particularly poignant, and like they cannot ignore what you're saying, and they can't ignore their facial expressions. The elected officials' facial expressions, for examples, can be very, very telling in that moment. And so it's the most direct way for you to speak to your elected officials. And again, at the end of the day, they work for us. So let's hold them accountable. We have the collective power to do that. And so now, speaking of public input, and this is just a picture of me providing public input on one such instance, what exactly does public input look like? And so we put together a little bit of a short, framework that you can use the next time you want to speak about an issue on the city, on the county, or on the state level. So of course, I would start off by introducing myself. If I was with Georgia Muslim Voter Project, I would say, hello, my name is Salih Sahani. I'm with Georgia Muslim Voter Project. And just like you learned in probably 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, at some point, you have to have a thesis and an essay. The same goes with your testimony, right? You have to state your ask, your sort of thesis, your main point at the beginning, and you want to make sure your main point is centralized throughout your whole testimony or throughout your whole public input. Then you'll make your point. And when you're making your point, just like the panelists did today so wonderfully, describe your community. Include the data that really supports and backs up why this particular issue that you're talking about is so important. And then, of course, also highlight the barriers that are coming in the way of you solving those issues that impact your community. And then with any essay, with any speech, close it out, restate that thesis, acknowledge whoever's in attendance, and thank the members as well. So yeah, that's pretty much a quick synthesis of how you all can be advocates. Of course, we could do a much, much longer version of this. And if you all do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is here, and I'll also put it in the chat. I've also put right here our Instagram and Twitter handle at GAMVP. I would really love for you all to check it out, to give us a follow. And yeah, thank you all so much. If you all have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat with the time we have remaining, and I'll shoot it back over to Rafael.
Alexis, I think.
Sorry, Alexis.
No, you're fine. Either way, thank you everyone for joining our panel today. And I just want to close it out with what I said at the beginning. I hope you come away with this with an understanding that, you don't vote for yourself, you vote for your community. So if you know someone that historically doesn't vote, this kind of concept of loving your neighbor, community through love, caring about other people and the things around you that impact them. So thank you again, everyone. And that is Community Through Love.
Yay.
And yeah, thank you to our panelists. All three of you were amazing. So I really appreciate it. And goodbye, everybody.
Okay, thank you guys so much. We are going to go ahead and take a quick break before we go into our next session. So feel free to get some water, do some breathing techniques, and just let it sit in, like everything that we just learned.